This is an EB-5 Investment Voice Special Report Update. Mona, what is going on? I got an email from you 20 minutes ago. Just packaged the last filing. Phew. And now here we are on a podcast episode 20 minutes later with these updates. What's going on?
Mark, I didn't think we were going to go through this again. The last time we went through this was, November 18th and 19th, 2019? Oh, my God. It's been this whole week. I think our office we've done an overnighter. We've been to bed at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock a.m. last minute filings. Since now, finally, people understand that the law is going to change.
And of course, you're referring to the signing of the omnibus, right?
But here's the thing, Mark. It was all about March 11th, that we were going to see the omnibus signed with the bill attached to it. But it's not happening on March 11th. And Sam, you're the man. What's happening? Why is it not being signed? Or when will we see the EB-5 bill signed?
We'll see it very soon, but we don't know exactly when. The House has done two things yesterday. The House passed a continuing resolution through March 15th. And the House also cleared the omnibus bill, the 2,700 and odd pages, with the entire EB-5 language in it, almost 100 pages or so in the bill. And now it's up to the Senate, right? The Senate has to clear one or both of these and send to the president for signature. And that's when we know where we're going. Now, in the Senate, we have certain people like Senator Paul and Senator Cruz who are well known to want to make their issues heard and are known to delay Senate procedures dramatically from time to time. But on top of that, we have Senator Lee of Utah, who has 10 senators lined up behind him, who is really passionate about getting a vote. I believe it's on COVID-related matter, and he wants a vote. He tried the same thing when the CR happened a couple of months ago. He lost that vote. He might lose it again, but he wants the vote. And if he can't get the vote, then those 10 senators can certainly bottle everything up. This is the reason why the House passed a 4-day CR in addition to passing the Omni. So that's where the ball is in right now. Nobody really wants to shut the government down. So it is possible that this Omni will go into effect on March 15th. It's also possible it'll be March 11th. It could be any date in the middle. Senator Leahy predicted March 13th.
Well, I have to say that the consensus opinion amongst most of us EB-5's lawyers, and we have a group called EB-5 Super Lawyers, and so we all know everybody's opinion, is that we should have it filed, all petitions filed by midnight, March 11th, because it could happen sooner than expected. It might go over to next week, but it's a risk that nobody wants to take.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Until Congress has acted, it's a sovereign body. Please don't bet upon the actions of a sovereign body. Do what you can. It would be crazy not to get your petitions in on or before the March 11th. Absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. And again, crazy filing. Lots of last minute petitions. Crazy hours. I hope we don't see this again.
Just for the context for the person listening, as we're recording this, it is the evening of March 10th. So March 11th is just a few hours away. And then that midnight is another 24 after that. So that's why everything is so crazy now.
Well, Mark, there is a lot going to change. We don't plan to talk about it in this particular podcast, just outline some of the changes. But we plan to have a lot of different podcasts with a lot of specialists to discuss many of the major impacts of the new law. There are some things that are really exciting some folk, and of course, you're not going to make everybody happy, are you, Sam?
No. When you make the sausage in Washington, D.C., there's always a product of compromise. And the sign of a good legislation is really that no one's happy with it. So that's par for the course.
Right. But here's a few things, though, just to whet your appetite. One of the big issues which surprised us all is the fact that pool direct petitions, which is what's been happening for the last 9 months, are now dead, outlawed completely.
What? They are dead as dodo, and they are dead for forever. That's what Congress wants. Congress has been quite clear in the bill. The first person to spot this issue, to my knowledge, was Robert Devine. And, he's a really scholarly guy, and he set out in his summary what has actually happened. And it's very clear. Congress is very clearly saying in the statute, as best as I can read it and remember, all of us are learning this as we go along. But as best as I read it, what Congress is saying is that if there is a pooled investment, it must go through the regional center concept and process. It cannot go in as a direct project the way it has been. You must remember, pool directs are not new. They've been, in the 90s, but there were plenty of pool directs projects in the 1990s.
Well, they've been. I actually think, Sam and Mark, that this is a really good thing because we've seen pool directs really get out of hand. It's become a little bit like the Wild Wild West, and there's no oversight in the way there is oversight with regional centers. So I think that is a good thing. And the other problem that we have with pool direct is the corporate structure is so mama and papa, and that doesn't fit with 2022. So I think that's great. And yeah, Bob Devine, he's a genius. He's been on our podcast show, Mark. You remember. What else are we seeing in the new bill, Sam?
Well, the big news is that concurrent filing is available for those doing adjustment of status with the I-526 filing in the United States.
Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for people? Because we use these terms. We use these terms, but it's for the average person. What does that mean?
Well, what that means is that when you file your I-526 in the United States, as a procedural matter, you can file your I-485, your I-765, and your I-131, which means that you'll be called for your biometrics within a short time, perhaps a month or two. After you file your I-526, they'll take your fingerprints and your eye prints. And then shortly thereafter, depending on how efficient USCIS is, you're going to get a EAD combo card, which means you're going to be able to travel back and forth between any country and the United States without a visa. And you're going to be able to work anywhere you want in the United States. And most importantly, you're going to have a status. And the status is adjustment applied for.
Yeah, so, this is huge. Yeah. This is really big.
Exactly. Whereas 526 earlier never gave you a status, whereas as I understand it, now the status will be adjustment applied for. So long as you're confident in your 526 application getting approved, it's a huge deal. You're getting practically all the benefits of a green card within a few months, a couple of months perhaps, of applying for the 526. But now this is only for adjustments, not for consular processing. So those who are overseas are not going to have this benefit, but those who are in the United States are going to have this benefit, particularly the H-1B folks, or perhaps the L-1s, or even the F-1s who are or the E-1s or the E-2s. They will all have this benefit in the United States. So it's going to bring the EB-5 market in a dramatic way into the United States from its overseas focus. The overseas markets aren't going away, but if you look at the total proportion of the total market that's in the United States for EB-5, it's going to increase probably dramatically. So that's what's happening, Mona.
I also see this kind of move is going to reduce litigation because litigation often happens out of frustration because of the long delays. People can't remain in status. They're already settled here. They don't have a choice. So that's why they litigate. So yeah, I see this as being a huge thing. And I think also, Sam, we are going to see more petitions filed into EB-5 because of this EAD combo card.
Well, absolutely. It expands the market dramatically. All the people, we've talked to a few, maybe half a dozen today about this matter, and they are practically jumped off their chair when they realize what this is, because they all know investors who face that, oh my God, 2 years after I give you so much money, that's when I'm going to be able to get my green card. And now, on the other hand, they're going to be able to look them in the eye and say, guess what? Within some weeks, maybe many weeks, but not many months, you're going to get your, EAD card and your advanced parole. A lot of investors feel, wow, that's something. And that's at least all the projects we've been talking to today. We're very excited about this possibility.
Yeah, every investor I know is as well very excited. Again, there's a lot of things in this bill which are going to make people unhappy. One of the big things is the fact that all of the agents or any third-party person must register now. And I think, again, that's a great thing. It's a disclosure. And in addition, Sam, restrictive TEAs to remove half of the urban RCs. What is that?
Well, look, the November 2019 regulation created this donut concept of the census tract and all the adjacent census tract, and that's it. Just that combination of tracts, which is usually around 4, 5, 6, or 7 tracts, a small number, to define the TEA. And when you define it in that manner, it basically puts the kibosh on gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is no longer possible for TEAs. It's no longer lawful, and it removes major sections of, maybe all sections of the downtowns of many, many, many cities from qualifying for TEA status. So they're going to have to hit the market at the 1.05 million at a $250,000 higher price than the 800,000 for the TEAs. And, my gut feeling is based upon the past record we have of what happened with people who hit the market at $1 million as opposed to $500,000. My suspicion is that maybe 1 or 2 projects per year, maybe 3 projects per year might succeed in completing their raise at 1.05 million. But most of the market, perhaps 90% of it or more, is going to be at 800,000. So that knocks out a lot of the urban RCs. Half or maybe more than half, maybe 3/4 of the urban RCs are no longer going to be in the EB-5 market. And this is by statute. So nobody's riding to the rescue through the courts anymore. This is it. Congress has decided.
Now, well, that I have to say, this is your opinion, Sam, because I actually differ here. I do think, well, we actually forgot to mention this, Mark. You're probably saying, what are you talking about? The new statute does change the minimum amount, raising it from 500,000 to 800,000 in a TEA. And 1,050,000, only 250 more, not double the price as it was before. But I do see a lot of investors who find good projects. If they feel that they're good projects in an urban setting, they will pay. I don't think that it's going to rule them out completely, Sam. I think it's going to keep a lot of good projects still in the running.
I know, first of all, hope springs eternal for everyone. Secondly, all the projects I've talked to historically have always said, look, mine is the best project. Mine is the safest project. And it's, what's the problem? Whether it's $1 million or $500,000 or whatever, people are going to come to me. I'm telling you, based upon what we've seen in terms of completed projects, I'm not talking about those who just wanted 2 or 3 investors. I'm talking about people who wanted 20, 30, 40 investors or some reasonable number. And from those people, we have seen only 2 completed projects in the last 8 years at the $1 million level. So, but albeit that was at a differential of $500,000. So look, it may happen. Look, the market has to speak. I'm just giving you my sense of the market, and my sense could be wrong. We're all learning, as I said. We're all in this together. Yeah. We're learning together.
That was at a time when you could spend 500,000 and be in the heart of Manhattan. So as I say, let's wait and see, and perhaps let's discuss this much later and see what we are seeing. But very quickly, a few other changes that we're not going to run through everything, but a few other changes. There's going to be a complete changed EB-5 landscape. Don't you see? There's age outs are going to be changing. There's also font tweaks. There's a ban on foreign ownership. That I found very significant and very welcome.
It's not just foreign ownership. It's also a ban on foreign government ownership. And that was important for New York. A major regional center here was, in fact, owned by a governmental entity in China. And there was a lot of questions raised in Congress as to how to perform proper oversight when a governmental entity of another country is owning the RC. So, some people didn't like it. I know an attorney, for example, who had a client in Germany, a major developer there. And they owned an RC here. And he was saying that, look, this is going to interrupt the flow of capital in the United States from credible developers overseas. But Congress has decided they don't like what's happening in the RC field. They want it cleaned up. And this is part of the cleanup. So, yeah, a lot of changes.
And then last time you were on our show, Sam, we did have the folks from AIIA. And were they successful in championing the grandfathering provision in this act?
Well, let's put it this way. The grandfathering is in. There's no question about that. And that's great. That's great. And it's great for 2 reasons. It's great for all those tens of thousands of, families. They say some people say as many as 80,000 people who have been on pins and needles, waiting to see what happens after having made commitment of their life savings in many cases, many of them with, children whose lives were committed in the United States. And they were just completely adrift these last 8 months plus. So that's a great news that they can now sleep in peace. And thank you to Congress for doing that. And on top of that, now the best part is that future EB-5 investors don't have to, because they are protected from a possibility of any future lapses. Congress Congress have left themselves the option of disagreeing once more on EB-5 in maybe 2026 or 27 or 28. And at that point, the program may lapse, but no longer would people have to worry. So that makes it much easier for projects to give confidence to EB-5 investors that, look, you don't have to worry about lapses again. Congress made a mistake. They've realized it. And they've fixed it. So this is one of the good parts of the bill, Mona.
Yeah, no, I really think they did a good job. Again, that not everything is going to please everyone, but the main thing about integrity is there, because one of the big things which we're going to see, is we're going to see the exit of a lot of RCs. That's what I believe, because the RC burden now is going to be so much more demanding. And Sam, I can tell you, because we do a lot of RC compliance, we talk to so many projects who have their own regional centers, and they don't know anything. They don't do any real compliance. They don't do any oversight. They don't do any follow-up. They're going to all be in trouble now, if that is, they are even allowed to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the fact that you're losing urban TEAs. The fact is that owning an RC and operating an RC is going to be much more burdensome, considerably more burdensome than it has ever been. And people are going to have to decide if they want to continue with that business or not. And you're right. A lot of people are going to say, no, this is not worth it. We have other things to do. We have private equity that we can raise with a lot less restrictions and the worries. So we're going to just switch to private equity and hell with EB-5. Been there, done that. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to say that. So absolutely, I think the number of RCs going forward a year from now or 2 years from now may be only a quarter of what we had in 2019, or maybe less.
And again, I think that's what Congress want, because then they can manage it. It's much more manageable to have 100, 125 rather than 800 or 900, some of the crazy numbers that we were seeing a few years ago.
Those are early days of this show.
And Sam, not only are RCs going to be more burdensome, but a lot of these projects which really relied on 100% indirect jobs, those projects are going to be out as well.
Yes, and that's the biggest change. People have been saying real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate. And, that works for some kinds of real estate. It works for hotels. It works for assisted living. But it doesn't work for large office towers and large residential buildings. And here's why. Because now everybody is going to need 10% direct jobs. And you really don't have those 10% direct jobs in large condominiums or large office buildings, because all the people who live and work there are not employees of the project. They're somebody else's employees. Now, if it was a hotel, you have a lot of people working there. If it's a assisted living facility, you have a lot of people working there. So, medical campuses are also in group. So it's not true that all real estate is gone. Real estate will remain a favored asset class. But by bringing in 10% direct jobs, it takes away people who, the kinds of people that this industry has gotten used to. It's going to be a major upheaval. It's a whole new EB-5 world.
Well, thank you, Sam Udani. It does indeed sound like a whole new world. Thank you for joining us on the show this evening, just a few hours before March 11th, a few hours before what we thought were these major changes coming in a couple hours. Now maybe it's a couple of days.
Since we started the show almost 6 years ago, we have been talking about this legislation. Mm-hmm. Do you realize that?
In various shapes, forms, yes. In the last 6 years, it has been.
Finally, it's here. So, yeah, it's an all-new world.
Yeah, if I can throw in an anecdote of Senator Grassley on this matter about the whole new world. Yeah. Earlier this week, a lobbyist on immigration, nothing to do with EB-5, they lobby on ICE detention beds and stuff like that, approached Mr. Grassley and said that, they were discussing the immigration provisions in the Omni. And she happened to mention, so I heard there's something about EB-5 in there. And he says, yes. So she says, but nobody's given me any language. And he says, that's right. So she said, well, why can't we see the language? And again, remember, she had to do nothing with EB-5. She was all about ICE detention beds. And he said, no, I don't want it released. I've worked 5 years on it, and I don't want to blow up the deal.
Then, as I said, since we started this podcast, we have been talking about changes, new legislation, one way or the other. And if you remember, Sam, the last huge deadline prior to the November 2019 was September of 2015?
Right, December 2015.
Thank you, Sam, for again joining us on the show. I know it was late. I know we all had very busy days, but thank you for helping us get this information out.
You're welcome. We're glad to be here.
Thank you for being with us today on EB-5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shah & Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's mshah law.com. Make sure you don't miss our next episode focusing on a different aspect of the EB-5 program by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB-5 Investment Voice.